Blue chicken eggs is definitely a reason to come visit your family.
Nobody wanted to be there.
Yeah. We literally walked from the field to the manufacturing site, into the depot, and eventually into the store.
I love that term so much too. It kind of makes me giggle, and it resonates with every single person.
Welcome to the Ultimate Offsite channel. Today I am talking to the wonderful TyAnn Osborn. She is a strengths expert, coach, and prior to launching her coaching practice, she held executive and global leadership positions for Dell, for PepsiCo. She was also the global HR director for Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, an organization with over $2 billion, not pounds, endowment dedicated to improving the lives of children in urban poverty. Today, she works with a variety of organizations to provide training, speaking, coaching, all in the wonderful area of strengths, which is a topic that's super, super close to my heart. So I'm really, really looking forward to talking to her a little bit about that. TyAnn lives in Texas with her beautiful family who, fun fact, were all profiled living their best lives in a documentary called Pursuing Happiness. Filmmakers traveled the country in search of the happiest people in America. So welcome, TyAnn. I am so excited to have you on the show, and I am super curious if we start hearing a little bit about that documentary. How did that come about?
It's so fun. So first, Chloe, thank you so much for having me. I mean, I already feel like we were kindred spirits and we only recently met. So this is super fun. Yeah, the documentary. This is one of those kind of, as we were talking about before, just say yes, like in improv, and you never know what kind of opportunities will come up. So I was following a particular blog, and they mentioned something that mentioned something that mentioned something. So pretty soon I was, 13 clicks into the internet, and I came across this thing, and it said, we're two filmmakers, we're making a documentary about happiness, we're going across the country to visit the happiest people we can find, and then we're going to see if there's, a common denominator or what the secret ingredients are.
Yeah.
If you know someone we should visit or a certain place, let us know. So, of course, I'm like, you should come visit me.
I love that you thought, I am one of the happiest people in the world. Come visit me. That's great.
I know. It doesn't hurt that I lived in Austin and everyone wants to come here. It's such a fun place. And so I really got them hooked. I said, not only is my family happy, but we have deliriously happy chickens as well, and they lay blue eggs. And so I think that was the hook, because these two guys from Los Angeles just had no familiarity with chickens. And so they came to see our chickens. We had a ball. We had the best time. It was such a fun experience for our family.
Oh, I love that so much. Blue chicken eggs is definitely a reason to come visit your family. Well, I totally agree. It's been so wonderful over the last couple of weeks, actually, getting to know you, hearing about what you do, and actually TyAnn and I were having a discussion about Offsites, which is the book that I'm currently writing. And she was saying, oh my goodness, I've got so many stories to tell. I've got so many from her wide experience working in corporate America, so many stories to tell, so many experiences of the good, bad, and ugly. And I said, oh, amazing. Can we have that conversation? And rather than just keep it between her and I, actually we could share it with you guys. So that is a little bit of the context of why we're here. And so I'm curious, maybe we start with one of those stories, or maybe we start with a kind of a reflection from your experience within corporate America and having organized, participated in many, many offsites over your career. What has been your experience? Tell me a little bit about that.
Chloe, I mean, there's so much to say. So the thing that really got me thinking about this a little while back was Harvard put out research about the demotivating effects of team building events. Yep. And I thought, ooh, what is happening? Let me dig into that. And they said that, 50% of team building events produce more disengagement and unhappiness. And certainly no one puts on an event to create unhappiness with people. And I thought, wow, that's so spot on with my personal experience. You know, this American background, and then always being in the human resource function. Often you are drafted or voluntold to be on the committee to make these things. And I have just been to so many that were so bad. I was talking to a colleague of mine. She had such a funny story, and I'll share a little bit of hers too. She said she was having to drop off. It was actually her husband, because the company was having an employee parade. And this is a company that has allowed people to work remotely. And so he lives nowhere near the office. He's about 2 hours away. And so she was driving him in to drop him off at an employee parade. And so all it caused was a bunch of unhappiness with people who were like, why would I drive 2 hours in for a parade? Like, what is the point?
Yeah.
Who's in the parade? What's the point of the parade? Am I watching the parade? Am I on a float? Am I waving to people? It was just kind of ridiculous to be wasting everyone's time that way. So she and I had a good laugh about that. And I was thinking about some of the ones that I'd participated in, some of the bad ones in particular. And I will say, for some reason, when people come up with these events, oftentimes they default to some sort of physical activity. I was thinking about this. I've been involved in a military-style obstacle course. Believe me, I'm nowhere near military fit, and so that was a disaster. I've been involved in a mandatory kickball tournament, which was like bringing up stuff from grade school. It was horrible. And then also been involved in a cricket match that no one had familiarity with, and it's like, to what end?
Yeah.
And so when I saw your writing and the book you're putting together about this intentionality and let's think these things through, it struck such a chord with me about, gosh, I know a lot of people who should have thought these things through. Now, I do have positive examples too, but it's funny how the negative ones just really stick with you.
Yeah, I think it's so, because they're so well intentioned. There is someone who has planned that parade,
Right. And
or
probably
that
put a lot of resources into it, a lot of time. These things cost money, and no one set out to, like, let's put on a really bad event.
No.
You know? So well-intentioned.
Yeah,
for sure.
but I think what it draws back to is the who. Who are you organizing it for, and why are you doing it? It starts with why. And Simon Sinek says it right, but it starts with why. Why are you doing this? If you're doing it, and then how do you translate that then to the people that you're doing it for, or the people that you're bringing together? Because otherwise it gets lost in translation.
100%. And you and I both like that question of what problem are we trying to solve?
Yeah.
Are we just trying to have fun? Or is there some sort of thing happening in the team that we really would like to put some intention around solving? Is it interpersonal? Is it a work issue? Whatever. And then another one of my favorite questions is, how will we know we've been successful? And success is not, yes, we had the military-style obstacle course, check.
Yeah.
Success is getting back to the problem we were trying to solve.
Yeah.
And people just lose it.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point in terms of what is that problem you're trying to solve, what is the measure of whether or not we've achieved it, etc. And they're thinking about that up front so that actually you're creating a feedback loop so that you can actually work out whether or not that shift was made. If it is employee engagement that you are targeting, and that's why you're investing lots of money in some occasions to bring the team together, is that actually shifting? Or if it's something else, what is that shift coming through? So I think that's a very key point. On the flip side, you must have experienced sub-events or offsites that have gone really well or have really met the intention. And tell me a little bit about what one of those might have. Is there something that springs to mind as, oh, actually that one was particularly good? Or is it more generally these sorts of things when they're in play, that's what success can look like?
So I've had two that I thought were really, really successful, and here was why. One of them started with the corporate team saying, well, we need to work on our customer experience. So they actually identified something for the company, and they had some metrics showing that it wasn't where the company wanted to be. But somebody in the sort of corporate headquarters came up with a PowerPoint deck and wanted all of us who were actually in the business to take this PowerPoint presentation, and it was 8 hours to take our entire staff away from their job for 8 hours to look at PowerPoint. And I thought, no one was ever inspired by PowerPoint.
And no one wants to be talked at either, especially not for 8 hours.
For 8 hours. And just selfishly, I was like, no, that's not going to work. And I can't stand in front of my clients, my people I'm supporting, and sell that. I don't believe in it. So I went back just to the thought process of what problem are we trying to solve? Okay, it's customer experience. So with that in mind, what would be a better, solution? And I worked with a number of team members, which that's another tip as well, is to get different stakeholders involved. And we decided we were going to start the day by taking the group on a field trip. And so we loaded up all of the managers, this was super fun, and went to a local BMW dealership, and then we went to the Four Seasons Hotel. So we chose these because we knew the general manager at the BMW dealership, and they had ranked in the bottom 10% of dealerships. And then they totally turned it around with the same staff. So it's not like, all the leadership changed, they let everyone go, anything. They were able to turn it around. And then they started ranking in the top 5%. And it was real. It wasn't a forced, made-up kind of role play situation.
Yeah.
It was real. They were very open and humble about how things had been and what they changed. So that really stuck with people. We talked there about how would this apply to our business. So that was for 2 hours of the day, and then our bus took us to the Four Seasons, and that is such a key tenet of how they run. We were with them, we shadowed, we started with housekeeping, and we went all the way up to the general manager about what that meant for their job. And to see every single level take such pride in what they do and to keep their why in mind, why are we doing this? Let me tell you, Chloe, so what would be more impactful for you, a half day actually looking at that stuff and talking about it, or 8 hours being stuck in a windowless conference room with PowerPoint?
Yeah.
People still come and talk to me about that event, and quite literally that event was 21 years ago.
Wow. It's bringing back so many memories. When I started on a graduate scheme when I was a buyer at Sainsbury's, a kind of Walmart equivalent here in the UK, we were taken away when the graduate scheme started to do like a field to fork. It was very much what you've described. We literally walked from the field to the manufacturing site, into the depot, and eventually into the store, into how you put that onto a customer's plate. And it was such a tangible way of really experiencing the end-to-end experience that a food product goes on. It's very similar, or echoes of the hotel experience there. And the other thing, when you were talking about the morning, going and seeing what does success look like? What's a real example of where a different organization has actually applied those lessons? What can we learn from others that might be in a different industry or a different experience? It was Great Ormond Street Hospital, which is a children's hospital here in London. They got the F1 team to come in with the doctors and nurses, look at the processes of how it was going on, and apply what happens in the pit lane to completely different context.
They have taken that pit stop and they have eliminated anything that's not necessary, and how do we get this done quickly and with high quality too.
Yeah.
And I mean, that has huge applications to so many places, and I imagine that really sticks with people, again, as opposed to, well, just do better, Chloe. Yeah. Now let's go play cricket.
And that experiential piece is so important as well, versus PowerPoints have a role to play, but definitely not for 8 hours. And what experience are you going to take more from, or what are you going to remember more, where you've actually lived, breathed it, you got to ask questions, engaged in the process fully. I imagine, though, a lot of work to pull together. And I think that that's a lot of where people get intimidated by trying to come up with something a little bit more experiential or a bit more creative or a bit more relevant. It can feel intimidating to them. I wonder if you have a perspective around that.
think this is a place where, since we talk about using your strengths and really tapping into those, and as a team we have a good representation of strengths, I think that's something like, you've got creative people in your organization. Maybe you haven't tapped into that before, but we can find those people who are high strategic or high ideation or something, that are coming up with things. Then we've got other people who might have a lot of analytical, or maybe they like research with input or learner, coming up with the idea, and then having a different team member. It's like, okay, go research all the ways that we could make this happen. So again, you have to not just be yourself. I mean, I could think I've come up with the best thing and then find out it doesn't actually work for other people, or maybe it's not in keeping with our resources that we have available, whatever. So I really think you've got to select a good team and let everyone play to their strength. Because, it can take a lot of work, but I've also found when people are working on something fun and engaging, it feels so much better and less like it's just this extra thing that you have to do, because most people don't have put on an event in their job description. It's just one of those things that kind of gets put on you. Mm-hmm. So when people are having fun, I'm all about fun, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's like with the bus tour or with your field to fork kind of thing. You can easily come back, and as people are coming back to work the office, you're talking about these things, you're sharing similarities, and you can keep calling back to that event. And really, I've never seen anyone call back to just a meeting. And so people are like, remember this thing we saw and this great idea they had, and how can we do this? I had another one, if you have the patience to hear another one that was fun, is we had a particular issue with hiring and retention. And so this is not a surprise. I was working for Dell Computer in their entry-level sales group, and it's by definition kind of a high turnover telephone sales sort of thing. And again, thinking, okay, what's a good analogy that would really resonate with people? My population was primarily men and young men, so you also have to keep in mind who your group is made up of. It can be a great idea, but if it doesn't resonate with that particular group, it's not good. And we actually called the University of Texas, one of the big universities in the United States. It's got over 70,000 students there, and they had this national award-winning basketball program. So we called up the head coach and said, hey, here's what we've got going on. Can we plan an event with you? So again, I guess I'm a big believer in let's get people out of the office, because then your creative brain can kick in. If you're in the office, you're thinking about all the work that's not happening while you're at this thing. So get people in a little bit different environment. And then it was so powerful, Chloe, when I was working with managers who really had a hard time kind of projecting into the future and thinking about building a pipeline of talent and that kind of thing. And to have the head coach, who was very well known in Austin, come out. We were in the basketball arena. We were right on the floor. And he asked the first question. He said, what do you think my job is? And you can imagine people were saying, oh, you're supposed to win. You're supposed to whatever. And he said, no, my job is to recruit. And because I recruit well, then I can win. Winning is an end result.
Yeah.
It's not the beginning. And I was like, yes. And so he got these managers who weren't thinking at all about a pipeline of talent. And he's like, you've got to be thinking about this every day, because you're only going to have people a certain amount of time. And so you've got to recruit the best talent, get the best work you can out of them while you have them. But when they leave, you can't just be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that Gary was going to leave. Like, everybody leaves. So it was so powerful, and the team really loved it.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Again, what's a different context that you can bring in or borrow from that can really elevate an overall intention? And what I've heard throughout all those three stories is, what is the one big thing that you're trying to shift or change? Like, what is the intent? What is the intention that you have there? I think one of the traps that a lot of leaders will fall into, or event organizers will fall into, is trying to fit so many different things in, trying to fit in lots of different sub-purposes, or you only need one critical thing to land. And so having an awareness of what is that
is. And you and I have both seen this. We were emailing back and forth on this. A team will either say, okay, we have one day a quarter to do something. How can we fit as much as in that as we possibly can? Or, as you and I both were like, oh crap moments that come toward the end of the year when the team realizes we haven't done our day. And that's when you and I both get calls about, what can you put together for us? And it's like, well, I can put together a lot of things, but what are you trying to do? And they're like, I just have to fill time, which always makes me laugh. I'm like, well, I can fill time. I'll charge you a lot of money and I can fill time, but that's not going to solve anything for you.
No.
That happens so often. Or they're like, oh, okay, we have 8 hours. What all can we fit in? We have to talk about some of this and some of that, and we have to get some compliance training done, and it's just a mishmash.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that is literally the reason I started this company. That's the reason I started the Ultimate Offsite. I was being asked over and over again to be almost just a time filler. And 2 hours in an agenda spot, so someone.
I make a lot of money as a time filler.
Yeah, well, so someone can tick a box that says training done, or something else that I don't have to present to you or present at you. And I just realized, you know what? There's a much, much better way, and I got really interested in, well, what are you trying to get out of this? And am I even the right person? Would there be a better facilitator? What can you use within your internal resources as well to achieve the same outcome if it's not aligned? Because otherwise, it's not actually getting to the outcome.
Yeah, but I'm sure you see this too when we ask, what is your goal? What are you trying to do? And we get the answer, well, it's team building. I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean to you? Like, well, we just want a team builder, so what do you have?
Yeah.
And it's, we have some new people, we have some tenured people, just come. Oh, so-and-so doesn't get along with so-and-so, just make that better. I'm like, okay, well, that's not it at all. You're totally missing the mark.
Yeah.
So I love the framework you have, which is just honestly making people think.
Yeah, start with that purpose. Priya Parker puts it brilliantly. She says, a category is not a purpose. And so team building would fall under that category. But what sits beneath that? Is it that you've got those new starters? Is it that you're trying to integrate new people? Or is it that the organization is going through some sort of change? But very often there's some sort of change coming or that's happened. And so how do you link it in really with what is going on, and then get clear on what is the one big thing. If only one thing happened in this day and your team left with one aha or shift, or one thing has shifted, what would that one thing be? That question is really hard.
How do we know we're successful? And a lot of people can't answer that. One thing I have found too is when you start probing into these things, one of my favorite questions to ask is, where is the hurt? What is happening here? Because so often, I would say, 75% of the time or more, there has been a big reorganization, because there's always reorganizations. Some people have maybe lost their job, or they're not doing a job they want, or they've got a new leader. I was told one time, I was working with a group, and they said, well, we've been a group for 3 years, and we've had 5 different leaders. I'm like, okay, that's a hurt right there. And so if you just put on, well, we're going to have a cricket match, you're not really taking into account what has happened, or again, what problem are we trying to solve. Maybe I'm putting together people who really have a hard time working together, and I'm saying, great, throw balls at each other now. Or here's a weapon in your hand, why don't you use this? Which doesn't at all address some of these things. So I've often found that there's a problem underlying that maybe the leaders don't want to admit.
No, the number of conversations I have with a leader, and I say, how's the team? And we all get along, it's good, but we just want to do a bit of training. And that, to me, sets a little bit of alarm bells as well, because a little bit of conflict in teams is healthy. As you probably know through was it Patrick Lencioni?
By the way, if you can see him ever speak in person, please do. He's so engaging. And the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Well, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the foundational dysfunction is an absence of trust. Exactly. Yeah. And then above that, the second dysfunction is around a fear of conflict. And often what I'm hearing when a leader tells me that everything's all rosy within their team, I'm hearing, where is stuff not being said? Where are teams afraid of or unwilling to challenge or complacent, or where has there been a lack of diversity or thought. These events don't have to just be rosy, fun activity. You can create an environment, and if you can do it well, Brene Brown talks about brave spaces. If you can create.
She's my best friend. She just doesn't know it. So.
Oh, well, we can all be best friends with Brene. If you create that brave space for some of that challenge or conflicts to arise and bubble up and be met. I mean, you need trust in order for it to function and work effectively.
I was called in to Salt Lake City in Utah in the U.S. to do a strengths half-day training with the team. Was told everything's fine. They just haven't had any professional development in a while. This is great. Fine. Totally standard, right? I get the group. It was a group of about 10 in a room. I noticed everyone's really quiet. There wasn't any kind of energy in the room, and I very much feed off other people's energy, so I thought, gosh, something's happening here. A little quiet, people kind of side-eyeing each other a little bit. So I'd probably gotten about an hour into the strengths content, and I can't make this up. Someone said something, and another participant slammed their hand on the desk and said, "You always do that. This is what you do." And I was like, holy moly, this has nothing to do with strengths. Like, something else is happening here. I put down the whiteboard marker and the presentation clicker, and I just said, what's happening? Tell me about this. And there were so many hurts. So I said, okay, how about we just table strengths for another day? It sounds to me like we actually have some real communication issues, just some basic things. And this is very silly, but a very real example is someone said, you know, when I CC you on an email in the CC line, I don't want you to respond, but you always respond and you jump in before I have a chance to. You're talking over me, basically, in email. And that the CC line is not for that. And this other guy said, well, if you didn't want me to be a part of the conversation, you shouldn't have had me anywhere on the email. Now, is there a right or a wrong? Not really. You could make a case. It's just a communication norm for our group had never been established. And that goes so far, not just how you fill out an email, but how do you track and follow up on action items? How long do you take to communicate with each other? Is 3 days to respond to your email okay? Or do you expect me to respond within 5 minutes? Do you want an email? Do you want a text? Do you want a Slack? They had never talked about these things.
Yeah.
That was a much better spend of time than talking about everyone's strengths. They weren't in a mind space at all.
Yeah, well, it's meet the team where they're at. And you know what, tackling some of these, it might seem trivial, but actually they're the little things that stack. If I look at my own romantic relationship or my own relationship with my partner, a coach of mine shared this analogy of between you and I right now, there is a wall of glass. There's a pane of glass between us. There's a pane of glass between me and my partner. And as little things come up, as the email is sent in a way or responded to too quick, a little bit of mud is thrown from your side of the glass onto the pane. And
that is so good.
And one little piece of, one bit of mud you can handle, but when every single time that's happening, mud is continuing to be thrown at the glass until at some point the two parties stop being able to see each other clearly, and it's not necessarily the fault of the other person who's sending the email or responding to the email too quickly, or my partner, or me. It's just the lack of communication, the lack of alignment. And so me and my partner do regular mud clearing session. At least once a week, one of us will say, have you got any mud on your side? Have you got any mud on your side? You've not put the bins out. Or the dishes were there for a little bit longer than I would have liked, before it becomes a huge major blow up. And I think offsites are a great opportunity, or those moments when teams are coming together outside of the day-to-day are an amazing opportunity to actually have some of these conversations, to actually set some expectations and boundaries in a way that it can allow for that. And so I often recommend to leaders not to be afraid of the conflict that comes up and adapt and actually embrace it, rather than saying, oh, no, this is not the right time for those two people to be having those conversations. What you just did there was brilliant, because it was, right, we're going to embrace what it is, what's coming up. And yes, Strengths is an amazing, incredibly powerful team, but let's work with what we're there.
I know if they had not brought in an outside facilitator, they would have never had that conversation.
Yeah.
Because they all had so much mud on their glass. I love that analogy so much. I'm going to use that. One thing too I often find is that roles and responsibilities are unclear. And when we confuse, we lose. And one thing, just to kind of bring it back to that home stories, in our family, we've set, like, who is the leader of the trash? Mm-hmm. Who does take the bin out? Who does pick up the packages? Who checks the mail? I mean, silly little things, seemingly, but then you don't get into these fights later about, well, I'm not going to take out the trash. I emptied the dishwasher, So that's really helpful.
100% establishing who's responsible for what and who's taking it. And establishing that also at the end of an offsite can be really, really powerful as well. I mean, my framework, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is around the 3 I's of the ultimate offsite. So number 1 is intention, which we talked about right at the start, is, what is the purpose? Why are we coming together? And with all of that in mind, who are the right people to be in the room? Where should we be doing it? And what should we be doing? That real intentionality. The second I is the interaction. It's like, how do you create space for some healthy conflicts to come up? How do you encourage participation so that you're not just listening for 8 hours to someone speak at you? And also then, how do you manage the energy within the day and not tram the agenda way too full? But the third I is the one that so many leaders or so many teams miss out. I said the fortune is in the follow-up. The fortune is in the follow-up. It's that implementation. What are we going to do differently as a result of having gathered? What are we going to do differently? And then, to your point, who is responsible for that? How do you utilize this to say, okay, right, TyAnn, you're responsible for this, and you're going to be supported by Jane, and this.
And here's how often we're going to check in, and here's some milestones and whatever, because we often just wander off. And if I don't know what to do or do differently, I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing. And we can apply this not just to an offsite, but just to a meeting, setting up what's the purpose. I'm amazed how many meetings still don't have a purpose, or don't have even a loose agenda, or don't have someone following up at the end saying, okay, Chloe, here's what I heard you say. I think we made a decision on XYZ, and here's who's going to follow up and by when. And so I'm always telling or suggesting to my clients, don't be afraid to be brave and be the one to ask or to say, hey, wait a minute, in 30 seconds, let's just put a bow on this so that we don't wander off. And so you can apply that to the offsite as well. You should apply that to the offsite.
And a lot of the steps for an offsite can be applied to a meeting. It's a significantly, usually bigger time and money investment. However, the application is the same. The 3 I's still apply absolutely to a meeting, because that second one, interaction, if you're not going to get it, then is a meeting is this the right method of communication, or is this, could this be done over an email, or could this be done in a different way? Is always another great question for an event organizer to ask themselves is this the moment to be doing this, or could this be done in a different way? And I think expectations of when people come together have changed since COVID as well. We can't escape that. With previously where we might have thought, we'll go into the expectation was to go into the office every day. It's not the same for many organizations. So there's even more responsibility or expectation.
Often now you might have to arrange for childcare or someone to pick someone else up, or it might take you 2 hours to get into the office now, depending on where you live. You might have to fly there. So, it better be worth my time.
Yeah.
One
perspective that you had, which I heard on your podcast, was this concept of mandatory fun. And now we've shared some examples of some offsites where there has been mandatory fun, but I loved that. I loved that terminology so much because I see it time and time again. The first point of call when someone thinks about planning an offsite is, what are we going to do that's fun? So I wanted to give you some space to talk about it because this came from you and it's just such a brilliant way to phrase it.
Thank you. I love that term so much too. It kind of makes me giggle, and it resonates with every single person because we have all had experience where you're, as I call it, you're voluntold. You have to go somewhere, or you're required to be there, and so it's like, fine, I come in, I really don't want to be here, I'm missing a day of work, I'm going to have to make this up, and now I'm being told you have to have fun. So I had a situation one time, an example, where this was a global event. People had flown in from all over. We had India, we had South Africa, so it was really a global event. And people had been in meetings all day, very intensive kind of workshop things. And then we were told, okay, now we're going to go have a booze cruise, as we call it. So you literally had to drive out to the lake and get on a boat, and it was floating around in the middle of the lake for 3 hours. And they had this music and like some horrible drinks, and they had like a ringmaster of the fun who was saying things like, well, now it's the limbo contest. Nobody wanted to be there. Yeah. And believe me, I am as extroverted as it comes. I love fun. And I'm like, if I hate this, everyone else is miserable. So you're mandated to have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And exercise is another example, or kind of the physical aspects of it that you were talking about, the assault course at the beginning, right. The cricket match, or I've been in softball tournaments and netball tournaments, and right. Some people absolutely hate it. Hate that.
People have different physical abilities, and just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So that's one thing. People have a lot of residual childhood trauma from sometimes competitive sports. And this one military style, tactical obstacle course, I don't know why we did it. I still don't know why we did it. And I don't know what the point was. I think it was trying to be like, oh, let's come together as a team. But the very last thing in this course was there was a giant wall. Just a flat wall. And you had to get everyone from this side to the other side. Well, I'm like, why don't we just walk around the wall? Why do we have to crawl over the wall? But there was no ladder, there was no supports or anything. So basically you had to build a human pyramid, which again, we're adults, we're not children. And I like to say we need to honor personal space, and especially touching other people without consent is a big hot button. So to force people to touch each other, again, especially if you don't like someone, and then to push people over the wall where your hands are on their bum and you're pushing them up, I'm like, really? I don't want you to touch my butt.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm just angry.
I did Tough Mudder, which is that assault course. So I would personally be really up for that kind of physical thing. But just because I like it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to apply for everyone else. I think drinks, I see this come up so much where it's like, tough. Oh, we're all going to go for drinks. And actually, that might not be appropriate for all of the group. Nor is it a strategic way to build trust. If we're trying to foster trust, which is a lot of the foundation of team building and team bonding, is all around that fostering of trust.
Yeah. So
there's
Chloe,
better ways.
As an HR professional, so many problems have been initiated because of alcohol at a team builder. And believe me, I like to have a glass of wine, a margarita, something like that. That's fine. This is a true story. When I had to say to someone, at what point did your pants or your trousers come off in the hot tub at the team building event? We should not have to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Why was there a hot tub? No one needs to be in their swimsuit with their coworkers. That's just odd. It's creepy. Why did your jeans come off? What? So it was just bad all the way around. I really encourage people, again, believe me, I like to have fun, but if you're going to have alcohol, make sure that's not the only thing and that's not the focus of the thing. Like a booze cruise, that's the focus of the deal. So make sure that's, not it.
When individuals are organizing drinks, it comes from a good place. It comes from wanting to
let's unwind, let's let our hair down, let's relax at the end of the day. But
Absolutely.
that's not everyone's idea of relaxing.
No, and I think it's best placed in combination with something else. And if you're uncomfortable with doing it yourself and facilitating, get someone else out, like get someone in, get a help. You know, it could be someone internal within HR as an example. It could be that you upskill yourself, or it could be that you get a external facilitator or trainer or someone else who can come help you with that, so that you don't have to just resort to the easy option.
You know, Chloe, I mean, that's such a good point, that often people who are asked to do these things, you know, they don't have experience in party planning or in event management or anything like that. And so they don't have the skill to do it. It takes a skilled facilitator to make sure everyone's participating. Have we lost anyone? Are the concepts landing? And then I often tell my clients, if you're the one doing the training or you're the one leading the event, you're not part of the event. And so if we're trying to build trust and team build, you need to be in that, not just telling everyone. So I'm always saying, bring in someone to assist. And often, again, that can help facilitate with those tough conversations.
Yeah, 100%. And the same is true of teams where they're innovating. If you're leader acting as host and facilitator, it's very hard to get your opinion, your perspective. And also it can mean that others are holding back on theirs because the whole boss is right scenario has come up. I've loved this conversation so much, so much.
Me too.
I'm curious, before we close, is there anything that we haven't talked about, or any key insights or anything else that you think would be really valuable to share as part of the conversation? Yeah, I'm curious to hear if you have any kind of final parting thoughts or perspective.
Well, I don't want people to be afraid now after hearing all of these stories. I don't want people to be afraid or think, gosh, I'm not going to be able to do any of this right. Because, again, that's not the point. It really is to bring us together as a team, or to get some innovative ways of thinking or try something different. So I don't want people to be afraid of that. But I do want people to treat this with the respect it deserves. This is something you're putting your time and your money into, and it shouldn't be just an afterthought or a tick box. And so just like we have strategy meetings that people really put their whole thought into, we need to have that intention, and not to be pandering or whatever, but I thought your framework and the way you have set that up is so brilliant, because it's easy, it's intuitive, and it really helps somebody step through, so that when we get to the event, we know exactly why we're there, and when we leave the event, we know exactly what has happened and what will happen. So I would just say, give these things the attention and respect they should have.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for your time as well. We'll leave you there. It's been wonderful. See you soon.
Thank you so much, Chloe. This is awesome.
So that's a wrap on today's conversation. Hope you found that helpful, and for more tips on how you can unlock the potential both within you and within your team, please hit subscribe below or leave a comment on what you took away from this conversation. Until next time, I'm Chloe Temple, here to help you unlock the offsite advantage at our next team event. See you soon.